kicking off the 2024 TV season with the LG G4. They did invite me to their headquarters in New Jersey for a workshop event, and what you're seeing right now is the 65-inch LG G4, where I had a few hours to go through a variety of different content. In the bottom right of the screen, you can actually see my laptop hooked up where I'm viewing specific games and movies that I wanted to test with. There's also a splitter set up with a G3 on the left. Next to it on the right is a Sony A95L, and then to the right of that is the Samsung S95C. So I will show some comparison between the four displays as well. Unfortunately, there was no opportunity to take measurements. However, I was able to look at a variety of different test patterns, go through the Spears and Munzel disc, and record a lot of what I saw, and then using the software that I use for editing, I can view the footage and look at a waveform and try to get some decent information based on how it's performing against the G3, the A95L, and the S95C. During the recording of this particular demo, someone flipped on the lights, so now you get to see the reflection handling of the lights on the ceiling. It is a fairly bright room. Last year on the G3, LG debuted what they call Vanta Black for reflection handling. Same thing again this year with the G4. Now, all these displays are out of the box. They're in their filmmaker modes. G4 comes with dynamic tone mapping turned off by default now. I did turn it off on the G3, and the Sony is in its professional mode. So let's start with some screen captures of what I've recorded. So you can see the G4 does bring an improvement in color luminance over the G3. However, on the QD OLEDs, you can see more saturation at the higher luminance level of the color. This is to be expected with QD OLED versus WRGB. Being that the displays are in their out-of-the-box settings means the Samsung on the right is in its P3 setting, not the BT2020, which means it's not using the full gamut that the panel is capable of. However, that's just how Samsung ships the display. So on Spears and Munzel, using the HSV BT2020 pattern here, you can really see the color luminance difference from the WRGB to the QD OLEDs. However, you also can make out a nice improvement from the G3 to the G4, and then also with a full screen white, you also see improvement again from the G3 to the G4. However, it's not quite reaching the A95L. However, if the pattern here shrinks a little bit, then the G4 actually takes over and is brighter, and then they kind of just trade blows depending on the window size. So it's hard to say with a window pattern if the G4 or the A95L is brighter. And as we get into real content, we're going to see that again where they kind of trade blows. Also, do keep in mind this was recorded with one camera with two different display technologies, so it is going to make the WRGBs a little bit more bluish looking and the QD OLEDs a little bit more reddish looking than they actually are. So even though no measurements were allowed to be made, we do know that we can expect around up to 2000 nit peak highlights on the G4 at very small, so 3% or lower window sizes, which means your small highlights on the G4 should be brighter than any other current OLED released. However, that also depends on the overall APL of the scene. So here with the horses in the snow, very high APL scene, we do see the A95L does have a luminance advantage overall. However, it is also clipping a lot of the details, even though this is only the 1000 nit version of the Spears and Munzel demo. So there's more detail seen on the G4. And using this pattern, we can see up all the way through 10,000 nits and which one can tone map the farthest. And the LG, while also customizable, by default will retain detail through 10,000 nits, whereas the Sony will clip anything over 2500 and Samsung will clip anything over 4000. So this is the customizable tone mapping option that's now been added with the G4. Previously, this was only really usable with calibration software. However, now in the user menu, if you turn off dynamic tone mapping and enable the professional toggle, you can adjust how aggressive the roll-off is for 1000, 4000, or 10,000 nit metadata. So if you increase it to 100, then it's going to clip or not show as much detail. If you decrease the number, like say all the way to 10, then it's going to darken those highlights so that you get more detail, and then you can put it anywhere in between that you want to. And it is available in all picture modes, including game mode, where I'm currently using it here in The Witcher 3. So if you were to set it to 100 and then compare it to HGIG, it would be the same. Or you could turn it down to anywhere from say 30 to 70 or something if you're playing a game that doesn't support HGIG. So God of War, Horizon Zero Dawn, those games, they don't support the console level setting. So now you can easily adjust the tone mapping roll off for games like that to see the highlight detail that's in those games. So it's here in the menu looking around. The only AI setting still in game mode is the AI brightness. You can still use expression enhancer in game mode or any of the others. This is just demonstrating with dynamic tone mapping on, which is going to make the image overly brightened. And then if you were to turn on the expression enhancer, it gets even more overly brightened. So if you are in a very bright room and that's what you prefer, you still have tons of flexibility as far as the settings are concerned to adapt the luminance of the overall image to your preference or environment. Now, onto one of the main things I did want to test. With the previous LGs, they would restrict the color luminance in the game modes to prevent burn-in when they have a 5-year warranty on the panel for the G series. So if you go back to the G2 or even the G1, like they had lower color luminance in game mode than outside of game mode. This became really apparent with the G3 because of how much brighter and more capable the G3 was. So there was quite a drastic difference where the G3's game mode had the same color luminance as the G2. However, now with the G4, you don't have to worry about that. At least with the couple games here that I did get to test, I saw absolutely no color luminance difference switching between game mode and filmmaker. So while it still won't have the high level of color performance that a QD OLED will have, it at least in game mode now is much closer than it was last year. Also, I checked 144 Hz with G-Sync and everything worked perfectly fine, no issues. Alright, now testing for shadow detail or coming out of black. We can see a nice improvement over the G3. We see the A95L is considerably lifted at the bottom of the grayscale, meaning that shadows are going to be overly brightened. And as far as accuracy, it seems and appears, at least out of the box with this demonstration, the G4 would essentially be the most accurate for just out of black handling. Another strong suit or advantage for LG is with upscaling or retaining correct detail without over sharpening. This is demonstrating the over sharpening effects caused by Sony, especially with reality creation on by default, but even when you turn that off, it still is over sharpening the image. Whereas the LG, whether you're upscaling or using native 4K, is the cleanest. This was also seen at the Value Electronics shootout last year, where the G3 won with upscaling because it does it the cleanest without any ringing or over sharpening artifacts that is seen on especially the A95L and somewhat on the Samsung. Here just kind of showing some high detail scenes. This is not upscaling, this is at 4K. However, you can also see that there's a perceived sharpness increase over the G3, but that's really more to do with the bump in brightness and color brightness over the G3 that gives that extra clarity and detail look. Again, this was in Filmmaker with all the AI stuff turned off, and the A95L has the reality creation on manual 20. The G4 looks perceived just as sharp, but without any of the side effects, ringing, or other artifacts that can be seen in certain content, which hopefully you'll be able to see in this upcoming clip of a motion test where I put each TV into their lowest interpolation setting, and with this current test you can see the little bit of artifacting that's caused specifically by the interpolation. And here with this interpolation test, you should be able to see some like shimmering on the Sony. That's not necessarily from the motion enhancement, it's from that over sharpening. So when there's very fine little details, especially being moved, it causes a shimmering effect in motion. And again, it's not really from the motion setting per se, it's from that over sharpening that they do and the ringing that it causes. That's really only an issue for small high contrast details that are moving though. Moving on now to out of the box skin tones. None of them were really what you would consider bad or looked off. The camera is not going to make this really visible to you in the video. The G4 I know is targeting D65 out of the box. Whether that's a good or bad thing for metamerism is for a different video, but at least it's targeting an industry standard that it should be targeting. The A95L, as known, targets D65, but gets there using a different color matching function than is used in the industry. So the out-of-the-box white and color is a little bit magenta tinted on the A95L, making the G4 out of the box more color accurate. All right, I'm going to show a few more screenshots of my footage with the waveform, and then we'll get into the Spears & Munzel demo to round out the end of the video. So when it comes to the overall luminance, again, none of this was measured with real equipment. This is just using the footage from the camera and then looking at it in the editing software. However, it does give a pretty good indication where we can see the G4 and the A95L consistently kind of trade blows. The G4 pretty much always is brighter than the G3, or more color luminance as well than the G3. The Samsung usually lands in the middle between the G3 and the G4. However, again, anywhere that's going to have very high color luminance, that's where the QD OLEDs will have their strength, and the G4 would drop below the Samsung in that, especially if the Samsung were to be calibrated using BT 2020, where it could use the full potential of its panel. And while there isn't a huge uptick in performance over the G3, it is very consistent, and it's not just in white, it's also in color luminance as well. Now on to one of the bigger issues that the G3 had, which is posterization, especially here in the opening of the Spears & Munzel demo. That effect is still very there for the G3, however it is improved on the G4. The Sony, the flickering you see is from the shutter speed on the camera, however it has posterization as well, whereas the Samsung was the only one that did not. One of the biggest improvements that I saw for the G4 over the G3 is the panel uniformity when it comes to color shifting, meaning the cyan and pink swirls or areas of the screen that were just like pink on the left side and so on. There's still a little bit of pink on the left side, which you can see right here on the G4. However, aside from that, on this particular panel, that's very common on the 65-inch sizes. But other than that, it was much cleaner than the previous G3. However, it is still not as clean as QD OLED, but it should be clean enough to be the point where most people wouldn't be able to see it or be bothered by it. However, keep in mind that I only got to see a few of the panels, and they very well could be cherry-picked, so we will have to wait for retail samples to get out there before coming to a conclusion about the screen uniformity. Another strong suit for the G4, as well as the G3, but now even more improved with the G4, is near black color saturation, especially when it comes to red. On the A95L, it still has pretty bad desaturation near black, again, especially with red, where red will just turn into like a grayish green color, which is not really an issue on the Samsung, but it is on the Sony QD OLED. When it comes to chrominance overshoot, I did not have anything with me to test that specifically. However, it was said to me that it was solved for this year, so future testing will confirm that if that is the case. And about the motion again, so the cinematic movement is not a new setting to LG. It has been one of their like preset, the lowest amount of soap opera effect type of interpolation setting that they offered. So what they did is they've kind of mimicked what the TrueCut upcoming kind of like theatrical type motion thing that's out there does, where it's going to detect camera movement, and if the camera is moving quickly or panning quickly, it can dynamically increase the amount of interpolation for those kinds of shots. And then when it detects that the camera is either stationary and or moving very slowly, or there's not much action on screen, then it can dynamically turn down the interpolation to reduce soap opera effect in normal types of scenes. This is going to be a purely preference type motion setting that some people will probably love, some may not care for it at all. It just depends on the person and the way that they like motion. However, as far as I'm aware, no other TV is doing this, so this is something unique for LG, and it's going to probably be a pretty sought after feature for some people who are looking for that kind of thing with motion. So my final takeaway from this is that the G4 is a nice solid improvement over the G3 in multiple areas, whether it's small improvements or moderate improvements. It just seems like all areas were improved, a lot of fixes were implemented. Overall, I would say it's a nice upgraded package altogether over the G3. I would also say it's the most versatile TV to date, being able to be very accurate as a working tool for professionals, or being able to be turned up to be brighter than anything else, really, with all the settings and options and so on that's given to you to adjust. And it can do so while retaining detail and just the overall sharpness and clarity that some of their settings can offer, or perceived so anyway, as well as the new AI features that I haven't even really covered in this, and kind of the expectation that everything is just going to work, which you can't say about some of its competition, as far as apps and streaming and HDR flags being detected correctly and other problems that some TVs have. Everything just seems to work on it. So all that combined makes it a very flexible TV that should appeal to a very wide range of people. So while it may not have the highest end of HDR level performance, I think it gets pretty close and does focus on other areas that could be more important to many people. Keep in mind, very, very little content goes over 1,000 nits. However, all content is going to have where it goes from 0 to 1 or whatever. Like that, just near black, to me, is more important at this point than going from 1,000 to 2,000 nits or whatever. Like, that's so rare compared to near black, which is in everything. And no TV does near black perfectly. So I will have more on the G4 soon. Thank you all for watching this, and let me know what you think down below in the comments, and I'll talk to you later.